You're listening to IDEA Collider, a show that explores the world of asymmetric learning. On this show, I will sit down with pharmaceutical experts and business leaders to discuss how to embrace uncertainty and the different learning style that follows. I'm your host, Mike Rea. Let's get into the show. This series is all about what I call asymmetric learning, so the ability to learn faster, essentially learn faster than the other guy, right? So that's it in a nutshell. So one of the things that intrigued me, and Brianna kind of went out on a kind of research hunt, was to find people that could talk about, a bunch of things. So security is one of those things, national security, but also cybersecurity, about, how you stay ahead, how you learn faster, how you remain competitive in an environment, focused on cultures of innovation, cultures of learning, what learning means to you, and maybe with Resecurity, how you stay competitive in an industry which must be like uber quick and fast and reactive and responsive, what your processes are, that kind of thing. So just really wanted to dive into the concept of learning and asymmetry. So, staying ahead of the bad guys, I guess, would be the main theme.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I read your site and kind of went through a lot of those things to understand what it was all about. It's always interesting here about from a management perspective, and as well as people that's in the trade, about learning, because learning is a big part of what our professions do, especially in the cybersecurity. The unfortunate part is they put so much emphasis on, the new bells and whistles, right? Security theater versus
Right.
pragmatically, our IT engineering, cyber in reality has not changed or evolved to what people think contrary to what people are saying. Because, and this is the same kind of ethos that I actually educate people on, which is, like, if you keep trying to chase after the new terminologies or the acronyms, you're just going to fall behind in the pile of dictionary of acronyms. And what you should do is focus on especially in cybersecurity. And this is the problem that a lot of cybersecurity professionals have in talking to the business and to the board of directors and the C-level suites, because they're so caught up in the technical jargons instead of translating it and educating them. And it's kind of reverse learning, right? You have to educate people on what you do in a very simple and concise fashion. I don't know if you know about the pyramid principle, which is like data, insight, implication, and action. That's the consulting principle. And in the pyramid principle, we often talk about, learning is the data, has nothing to do with insight or implications. Because in the management principle, you have, there's people at the C-level management directors that have to make decisions,
Right.
and decision based on the evidentiary information. And people are so focused on telling you a long email about the data, not about the insight of what that data is, or for the next person to decide what's the implication that you need my action. Hence the data, insight, implication, and action.
Interesting. So what do you, if you dug into things like definitions of insight, because, one of the things that we struggle with in the pharmaceutical industry, what's an insight? Is there a kind of working definition that you use?
Yeah. So it's basically, why should I care? Why does it impact me or the business? Because I'll give you a perfect example. Like COVID, I'll use COVID as an example. COVID, we have all of this data, but there's really no insight to what about the data. Like, should we do something as a person? Should we do something about it? And of course, you got these health officials as well. All of these countries, there's cells and growth. It's increasing and decreasing. And okay, so what? And there comes the insight. Well, if you're in that region, you should get vaccinated. That's the kind of the ethos, right? And then the action I'm going to do is, okay, I'm going to go get vaccinated because I'm in a hot area. But people are inundated with so much data about, COVID came from this, it's man-made or not man-made, or, it's spreading across this. You need a hand sanitizer. There's so much info that we don't have chance to um, take action with. Because, and part of why I thought your podcast, your thing was interesting was because oftentimes people are educated in a very serial fashion, and they
Right.
just want we're like information seekers, right? And trying to become an expert, like we become Google experts, and instead of like okay, like how do I gather all of this information, or how do I learn new things in a manner that is more portable and concise to what and how you should relay the message, and like what is your role in that cycle.
Yeah. So I'd be interested in because I'm assuming some of your clients and clients that you know of must come in because they're concerned about the action or the implication, but they don't understand the process of insight or data.
Yep.
Where do how do you manage that kind of interaction between people who need to know stuff and people who need to make decisions?
Well, I think this is where we as Resecurity differentiate ourselves in a very simple way. We don't we focus on one thing which is intelligence. And I always tell people intelligence is not about the delivery or the presentation, pretty
Yeah.
pictures. Intelligence is about data and being able to collect unique set of data that is not readily available, what we call commodity versus proprietary or closed source. We have so many acronyms, and we've educated the people to say, hey, there is cyber threat intelligence, or there's bad things happening around the world. It's like, well, no shit, it's been like that forever. We don't need to go into cyber. The burglaries happen every day. Theft happens every day. Shit happens. And all we did, but those are public information. So, and what I tell our client is like, look, we're not here to boil the ocean.
Hmm.
We just want to know about your business imperative, business objectives, your roadmap, understand what those are, so we could see who, and this is where we get into the details of like who, and the answer that we answer for our client is who is targeting and how are they targeting. They don't
Yeah.
care about, yes, you're breached. We tell you like who and how. That's the
Yeah.
actionable intelligence that people are looking for. And the
Yeah.
board, when we talk to them, they tell me the same thing. We have lots of smart people. We have AI and ML. I spend, $1 billion in solutions, but I don't know if I'm getting breached. I was like, look, you're trying to fill this void of 100%, and everybody has this metric thing going where they want to close the gap to like 9900, but that's not reasonable. So that's like saying your house is never going to get robbed.
Right.
That's not humanly possible, because you can't change the sentiment of a bad person who wants to target you. And so, what I tell people, especially with our clients and the board of directors, we have lots of smart people, we have all these tools, but I don't know what's going on. I said, well, that's the problem, is you're asking the wrong question. You need to ask the very simple questions. Like, are you being targeted? That's the only thing that matters, because now in the age of kind of the threats and the things that you deal with, we created such a big digital sprawl. Only thing you're going to get is, because you left all these breadcrumbs everywhere, you're going to have the same kind of information, and you're allowing the bad guys to happen. Think about Instagram. All these people that get robbed in Instagram. Why? Because they're exposing their wealth.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if I was the
Yeah.
bad guy, I'd be like, oh, that guy has a lot of Rolex watches. Oh, I see him dining here all the places. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about education. It's like, think about what you do as a person. It's no different what you do as an organization. When you go to the cloud, when you talk about digital transformation, when you're on your road trip talking to people about, hey, these are new products coming, it's gonna crush the competitors. If I was a corporate espionage person, I'd be like, I want to know what that is, and I'm gonna get paid for
Right. Yeah. So you use the word theater. So apologies for just rolling straight into this because
it.
I'm
Yeah, yeah,
already
yeah.
play advice, but you used the word theater about this before, and I'm kind of interested in this idea of cybersecurity theater versus kind of focusing on the fundamentals. What can you elaborate?
Yeah, the part of the you know in the last 20 years, we in the and I've been in the operations side before I started this company, and
Yeah,
I've also helped grow many startups in the past. And one of the big things that, because there's not enough time, resource, and money and expertise and all the things that happen in the world and the tools, you have to imagine there's roughly about 40 plus tools for any size organization, from the endpoint to network to privilege access, access control, mobile device management, patching, vulnerability management. There's so many tools, you can't become an expert. So what happens is people are start building these massive, and you're going to hear this a lot, single pane glass to like a command center view to see everything. But
yeah,
that's what security theater is. Yeah,
yeah,
they want to be able to look at a platform and see, trending across the world, what's happening in China, what's happening in America. They want to see like, little missiles flying everywhere, like hackers showing. And this is actually one of the product that in the past that got closed down, but they had this great visualization of, these hackers attacking, doing DDoS, and you see this globe spinning as this thing happens. I'm like, what value does it absolutely bring me of having that pretty picture?
yeah, yeah.
Sure, if you had somebody come into your, security operations center and they see this globe spinning with active attacks, they're going to be like, "Wow!" But it's like that's a joke, and
Yeah.
which is why we call it security theater.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me 'cause I remember being allowed to see there's this thing called IBM Watson, kind of, which is
Yep.
supposed to be like healthcare AI solution, and it was exactly that kind of nonsense. They showed us this thing in San Francisco, and it was like a full wall full of spinning things and data. And as soon as you asked them a question, they ran out of talent, right? So they couldn't answer any of the things that they were showing you, but it looked great. So whoever built the visual system was phenomenal, but the people that had the intelligence building it it was missing any of that, rubber hits the road stuff. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And part of, and I think what's happening in the trend wise is people are learning and being educated that, they put these things to show people, but they're in, check mark box off of an auditing requirement.
yeah,
But nowadays, because now the threats are real, stuff are being turned off, healthcare systems, utility, those are all impacted because now we're all connected device, IoTs, whatever you want to call it. And because of all of this, when you have these kind of technical espionage or technical impact to a production or humans' life saving systems, now they're saying, uh oh, okay, what is going on? Like, this is like really devastating. Like, either the security IT and the security team needs to really tell us what's going on instead of like, oh, we have monitoring in place. I was like, well, no, you don't. You just have
yeah,
commodity data, and
yeah. So
what's
with
the
so to help me pass this, so that idea of a threat, right? Just assume I'm a complete novice because pretty much I am here. So, how do you know that something is real? How do you know it's a threat? How do you know that what's the kind of language or philosophy that you apply to signal versus noise in an environment like that?
well? So there's a couple of parts, right? Threat is, and then I actually did this whole demonstration and explanation to people about modern threat intelligence. I mean, threat is someone or group that is intentionally creating harm, whether
Hmm.
it's logical, physical, whatever, kinetic, whatever you want to call it. It's somebody's willingness to do something to you. Now, that's very broad. Fortunately for us, it's very easy because we focus on criminals. Because let's be realistic. When you say a threat could be anything. It could be electronic. It could be radio waves. It could be, weapons of mass destruction. But people confuse the definition. That is a means to what a threat actor is versus
Right.
what actual threat is, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of times, we have many people that come out of the government agencies, military, and they bring in their lingo back into the corporate environment. And then from the corporate environment, the marketing team takes these special acronyms and wordings from the military. And then all of a sudden, everybody in our industry acts like they've been in the military forever. Like, we need to create standard operating procedures. We got to follow. And I'm just like, give me a break, right? And I have friends that's been in the military doing life saving stuff to protecting our national security, and I'm gonna tell you, they do not talk like that. And these are lifers that's been in the military. They speak plain English. Like, it's too complicated. It's like we don't want to deal with it. So I think for us, educating what a threat is, we're racing against the time with marketing terms, because marketing puts out all these threat actors, threat adversaries. It's like, and basically in all my meetings and calls, like, look, they're just criminals, and that's really it is. I mean, and then when you talk about, and I try to explain to them, like, they try to say it's nation state, it's from China. It's like, look, I could give you thousands of evidence that shows that criminal are not, they have some enterprises, but that's like 1% echelon of power, right? And it's kind of like saying every criminal activity is done by the mafia. Okay, sure. You know what I'm saying? Like, or the Chinese triad did it, or the Yakuzas did it. It's like, it's not reality. They have many subgroups that they handle the lower stuff. And it's not like the cartel doesn't operate like in this humongous vacuum. They have, spokes and wheels to manage these things. But the problem is what we talked about before, with kind of tying back to the security theater. We have lots of, when you talk about signal noise, is that we have so much commodity data, public information, and people create these AI machine learning rules to, try to visualize something or imply something. The problem is because there's so much commodity, one vendor may say X versus another vendor Y and another vendor Z, because they're trying to boil the ocean. So this is when we talk about Y versus Z. One of the things that, like I mentioned before, we try to stay far away from this world events, because, like, whether it's, the war that's going on, or whether it's COVID, because part of the problem is they're so focused on the event and the signal, all these, hey, look at what's happening in social media. And then, I think you already know, when you're using social media, you got sentiments, and the AI machine learning that applies when a person is clicking based on their habits and utility kind of changes the narrative. So, and I always tell people, it's like, well, that's not really signal. That's called controlled propaganda. It's a good marketing. And so for us, that's why we try to stay focused, not on the technical side of things, but on the business aspect of things. So if the business is trying to expand to different regions, or they're trying to build a pipeline in Africa, or they're doing some major motion picture in a secret place in Santa Barbara, we want to know the business intelligence to actually tie the actors, because biggest thing that everybody talks about is, like, there's lots of noise, and it's like there's open source and there's private source and public sources. Like, none of that really matters. It's about it's actually building a chain of assets and developing assets. So 90% of our operation and people, it ties back to our human operations.
So how much do you need to understand how a bad guy might think in that environment, right? So understanding what your business needs to protect, but also understanding its vulnerability must, do you need to put, how do you get into the mind of a bad guy in that setting?
Well, I'll say this very bluntly. I think you need to be in the gray in order
Mhm.
to really be able to. I guess in American lingo way would be like, you have to be a criminal to know how the criminals think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's psychology. I think it's mental. I think it's also a person's background, or somebody who's very curious. I know it's very broad, but in there is a when you s- it, I think there's a lot of saying about this. When it's who you surround yourself with,
Mhm.
and we surround ourselves with lots of criminals.
Yeah.
That's the best way to put
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
That's a great business plan. But it's always been part of the problem, right? Is that the imagination is often the thing that's lacking from the people that have the data, right?
Yeah,
they can see things as they are, but they can't imagine how they might be.
yeah.
I guess unless you're doing that mindset, um, placement, that would be quite a hard thing to be able to do.
Well, I have a stepson who is autistic.
Mhm.
He has a disability, and he loves what I do because he thinks it's neat. And then he wanted to understand a little bit more. So what I told him was, I'm the bad guy going after the bigger bad guy, and
Right.
that's like
Yeah.
the best representation of
Yeah,
it.
you're like a pain bad guy, yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess in order to be able to do that, they kind of because I'm assuming that technology gets built up on the bad guy side as well, right? And the need to stay ahead or the need to be able to be responsive or reactive in real time is, must include the awareness of how they're thinking about attacking.
Yes, but here's the caveat.
Mhm.
First and foremost, we're a data company first. We gather tailored intelligence for our customers. That's the
Right.
reality.
Yeah.
Our platform is just a delivery mechanism, and I tell everybody the same thing. I don't have the prettiest look and feel. Our platform, I would say, is like the most bland, boring platform you could use. Right? It doesn't have fancy lines and all this crazy stuff, but I always tell people it's also like Google of intelligence. Like
Mm.
you could find everything related to a bad guy, what's happening, who's talking, who are they associated with, all connecting the dots in our platform. And that's why we call our context platform the workbench, because it's a workbench for anybody to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And your clients are then putting together their own solutions based on what you're telling them, or you're just providing that kind of that threat evidence.
Well, so I'll use the kind of the analogy of a castle, right? Everybody is trying to build their own castle, every business or individuals. They're protecting themselves from the harm. You have your home IoT device, you have a fence, you have, double plated windows or whatever, but you could only see so far, right?
Mhm.
So, like the military, US military likes to call us the UAV of intelligence because we go
Yeah.
far beyond that wall and that moat to find out who is talking about you. Now, that's
Right.
not a technology thing. Sure, it's a lot of signals, sensors to collect those informations, but it's also really about, you could say, almost like in a offensive operation to continuously develop these threat actors to understand what they're doing, how they're doing, what they're talking about, what are their interests. Do they like sports? What are the kind of the synergist converse with them. So
Mm. And do you? So I'm interested in the kind of way that you might look at something like prototyping or developing, what ifs. Is that part of the kind of process that you deploy? Because I mean, there's the cold stuff, and then there's the what ifs, and then as you say, there's this kind of imagination for what the bad guys might do. So is there a kind of what if component to your learning approach?
yeah, you know, the what if is it's kind of like the risk framework, right? Likelihood or probability of an event happening, right? The what ifs. Part of our data lake, one of the things that we've actually, from a technological innovation perspective, is to really implement and enable natural language processing and sentiment analysis using our own set of data. Because we get a lot of because AI/ML is really about having fresh set of samples of data. Otherwise, it's learning from the same nonsense stuff, right?
Right.
So because we have the most freshest data, we create a lot of these things to to address not the likelihood or probability, the whole algorithm behind it, we kind of changed it to the threat actor's capability and their actual ability, the what ifs, right, to do something. So in the past, people have talked about likelihood or probability as some kind of metrics to show, whether or not you should take an action or not. Instead, we took a reverse approach because we had the data and we had the evidence to show, like, this person is targeting you. That's not a what if. It's a evidentiary to say this person is targeting you. Here's the evidence. Here's how he's doing it. And by the way, he's actually gotten some of the data already. So nowadays, I think people are more focused on, data loss, reputation, and just, organizational impact, right? Catastrophic, they call it category D, catastrophic disaster across the entire company. And that's what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah. Have you got any examples that you could quote from, well, ones that you are public enough to quote that you could sort of demonstrate some of those principles?
Principles, no, but we have we have many work products we've done where we were tasked to do uh, we're tasked to do certain things, whether it's government, military, enterprises, and we've been ahead when it comes to 0 day that appeared in some phones, or the nation state acting against another state stealing military data. Uh, because a lot of our work, unfortunately, has been done through a lot of these work, I think it makes it, and because we're a smaller, I mean, we have 75 people around the world, but we're just privately held company, and there's a reason why I didn't take any VC money, not because we needed the money or because we wanted VC money, because we get to do things, interesting things, and work with people that are interesting to us.
Yeah. And so is the ability to see something before somebody does it the kind of critical factor in your industry? So, a day ahead of somebody else or a week ahead, or that you've seen it and they haven't seen it? What's the kind of critical dimension?
Well, I think it's really being able to identify precursor to an event, or
Mhm.
being able to actively monitor uh, live event before they unfold. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of times we're already getting enough signals. We're getting door knocks on our doors, windows constantly, and which is all great, but there's so much data you don't know what to do with it. So um,
Yeah. Now, I remember a conversation with someone from the WHO about, this signal to noise problem, right? So, they're monitoring for pandemics. And my assumption was like, they might get like one a week. So, no, we get about 200 a day. I go, what? Wait, what? Is there 200 signals that there may be something that's emerging? There's a virus. There's, something interesting happening. And so, what's the next step? She said, well, the next step is validation. So, verification and validation. So, do these 200 signals mean anything? Are they true? So that gets it down to about 30 per day, right? So like 170 of those, 200 are just nothing. They're just like, what if, or we saw this case and nothing happened. So then from 30, you go down to, a proper process of validation to get to, and by the time you call a pandemic, actually, it's pretty serious. So you've done this big filtering from 200 a day down to, one every 3 years or something. Um, is that, what kind of ratio do you see in terms of, the kind of noise versus, something meaningful?
well, that's what you're referring to is the classic upside down pyramid
Mhm.
of
Yeah, yeah,
information funnel, which is every organization is dealing with, millions and millions of signal per day, wind it down to the 10,000s, down to the 500s, and down to what's actionable, or to after validation, it does something. That requires both technology and human. For us, use cases with our financial customer versus a manufacturing versus, let's say, oil and gas. Um, it's also, how do you weed out those noises, right?
mhm,
That's the first part. We don't try to focus on a lot of the open source or commodity stuff.
yeah,
Commodity meaning that publicly available, like stuff you could buy, which a lot of people do. One of the big things that we actually work on is, I mean, we manage over 36,000 plus unique sets of data
Hmm.
sources every day. And I'm not talking about stuff that's publicly available.
Right.
So, a 24-hour period, we have 36,000 sources, signals coming into our data lake. And we have a team that literally manages and validates that whole process in real time. And they have 24 hours to rationalize all of this and then pumps it back to our client systems so that they could actually gain meaningful things out of it.
Yeah. So let me ask you about that. So, is your data lake, your data sources, is that a differentiator for you as an organization? So, and then the next question is, who decides where to go looking for data and what kind of data you're collecting? Is that also part of your special source?
Yeah, special sauce. Yeah, it brings us money, yes. But I would say 20% of our data is like our secret sauce. The
Right.
amount of the data sources that is constantly hunted by our R&D team, that's the human side. So 20%, that's the secret sauce of our data lake, the volume of data, the quality of data, which is the most important. But then the 80% of our business and reputation relies on our R&D team, which is our hunter unit,
Yeah.
because they're the one
Yeah.
that's constantly looking.
Yeah, and how does someone know that you're right? I mean, one of the challenges that you face in an industry like pharmaceuticals is knowing, you may signal something is true, but then if you prevented it, how do you know? What's the, how does that work? How do you know that that you saw it, that you called it, that you were right about the, anything that you provided?
Kind of like what you said about the data signal winding it down. On a monthly average, I think I get on to maybe down to about two or three things where I need to escalate from a national security level, like a major breach, major law enforcement action, military stuff where I notify or I work, collaborate, partnership with various government agencies, both domestic and international. Um, but, you know, there is no kind of rhythm per se. What we do is we tried our best and share information where it's feasible, but we call the we because we interact heavily with the marketplace or the underground. A lot of times we could weed out, I would say, good 90% of or 92% of the information that is either false, bragging, or just a resell. And the thing that we care about the most is not the bragger, it's the resellers. Because reseller
Right.
means that somebody already sold that data multiple times. And we want to get to the source of the person that sold it the first time, not the resell like a wholesale, like marketplace.
Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned law enforcement there. I mean, is that a close relationship? Is that something they're doing as well, or is it mostly delegated to private organizations?
No, I've been working with various agencies for a very long time. I think it's important to have industry relationships. They have enough stuff to do protecting, humans to businesses to politicians. I mean, they have their work cut out. And on top of this, now they have cyber threat. So we try to provide them with any kind of intelligence so that they could, do their criminal action that's impacting things. It's a mutual bidirectional kind of relationship, right? Because
Yeah,
we want to do the right thing by providing and partnering with law enforcement agencies. And then, they ask us for things that they need help with because, either somebody couldn't do it or, it requires an undercover operation.
yeah. So you're a private company. I'd be interested in learning about your culture. What's your leadership style? How would people describe Resecurity as an organization?
Well, I think our management team is very simple, flat. We don't have multiple layers. At the end of the day, you got my brother and I. that runs the company, both from the finance and administration side, and then technology. We have lots of smart people do it. Culturally, I wasn't the best leader in the past. Maybe I was. I think I've done my best to grow our industry and help with the industry. But I also, as I mature, you learn things, right? You grow up, and I think running this company also helped me to see things a little differently, not as an individual contributor, but as a leader who's supposed to be providing vision. So I took it upon myself and the team to really kind of reverse all these roles. So we really do have a bottom up approach. Everybody, what they say does matter. What they say does get implemented. We have a very short sprints and development life cycle. We have a very short decision time when it comes to what people wanting to do things professionally, personally, and even for our organization. We hear what they want to do, we implement it right away, and let them see that we do listen because we're also very nimble, and you know technology is not complicated. Like you talked about the whole learning strategy. All of us foundationally, everything is the same. We just put a lot of acronyms, but it's still math from a technology.
Mm.
It's also about logic and putting it all together. You got to have the right, talent and people to do this thing. And we've always been, believe it or not, 100% virtual from day one. So for us, maybe we're introverted, but obviously you got a leader who's a introvert stuck in an extrovert's body to make it a little lively. But yeah,
Yeah.
we have a very bottom up approach, and we let people do what they want to do because we've known them for some of them since kindergarten, and we
Yeah.
had zero attrition since we started the company.
Oh, really? Wow. That's huge. Because I guess, I mean, there is no, I can't think of an example where someone needs to be as agile as a company like yours, right? Which is like you're judged by today, not by what you did yesterday. So that must be a huge pressure on your shoulders, but to kind of keep getting that right.
Yeah, and we try not to do any performance reviews. We focus on create value chain for our own team. Making them feel like part of the company, not necessarily like hey, this is your reporting was late. This performance review stuff doesn't really work. I think creates a negative connotations because you're based on merit versus it's the same thing when people went to virtual, right? And every manager had a problem with performance and not knowing what people do because they have such a little draconian way of wanting to make sure, like point fingers. And the
Yeah.
reality is like just let them do the work, and if the
Yeah.
work actually gets done, then why you really care?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, we see this. I mean, there's a lot of pyramid structures in pharmaceuticals, and you kind of wonder a how it gets started and b how it gets maintained because it's such a hard thing to do. And it's almost the opposite of any kind of agile organization is when there's decisions going up and down constantly, and the speed that it takes to get that done is really tough. So is there anything that if you'd learned like 5 years ago that you feel like you'd have been in a kind of better place next to what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, I think it's more on the financial. Well, I I don't think there's anything that I wish I would have known because this is where it led me to be a better person today. But
Mm.
the big thing, obviously, is we're all trial and error based. Our
Right.
entire
Yeah.
mindset of our team is trial and error. So for us, anything that we made a mistake on or invested on that didn't turn out the way we did, for us is like, oh, now we know, and we just keep moving forward. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie to you. I don't know how many times we invested something or put effort into something or decided took a pivot on certain things, and then we swung it back because well it didn't work, and now we keep going. And this is the engineer mindset, right? It breaks, you fix, you break, you fix. It just
Yeah.
constant churn.
But I am fascinated by that idea of sort of prototyping, the kind of breaking and fixing mindset, because it isn't the same, right? A lot of people want to get it right before they commit. Are you trying things with a view to if it doesn't work, then we've learned, and if it does work, then great? Or is it what's your approach to that?
Well, our prototype ideology comes with lots and lots of talking. Technically, we know we can do a lot of things.
Yeah,
So it's really and this is, you'll find this funny. We spend more time talking about the prototype. I don't, what do we learn from the past? What do we learn? How's this going to really impact the future, impact the competitors? And then there's more times when we talk about internally about a prototype and it never, but all, remember when I talked to you about the effort? And then at
mhm,
the end, we decided, you know what, we're going to pass.
mhm, yeah,
And we build something. But the, for us, the big thing has always been like, we want to try different things. We want to really revolutionize technology or what we do, or we want to kind of make a, you know, impact uh, at a greater level than just making money. And we
right.
want to always do the right thing by doing the right thing for our customers and doing interesting thing with our customers, trying different things. And that's, we're always chasing after the rabbit in a way, but we enjoy doing it. So when you have a team that thinks like that, it makes your life so much easier.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually. So Stephen Johnson wrote this book, "The Enemy of All Mankind," which was really about the early days of British pirates, and he talks about the pirate ship as actually being a very interesting culture of very narrow management, very lean management. He talks about the kind of the role of democracy because he talks about British democracy mostly coming from pirate ships, right? Because there was this said if everyone's dangerous, you have to
Yeah.
have a process. Like, you can't just have a king telling you what to do. But the interesting thing in that book that I learned was that how many people who were on ships that were captured by the pirates wanted to go work for the pirates, right? That was really interesting. So part of that mindset, A, it's more fun and they're leaner and they're more agile and they've got a purpose, which a lot of the other ships they were jumping onto didn't. They were just chasing the gold. So it's kind of interesting to hear, you've got to have some fun and also be slightly rebellious at the same time.
And I like that enough. I mean, I like what you just said, and what the book actually talks about when people jump into the, when they come, like, basically become a trader and be part of the thing. Part of it is you have to work as a team. You have to be a unified as a team. And when everybody thinks this way you do, talks the way you do the things exactly the way you do, or how you do with them, um, then we know we have the right culture. And
Yeah.
our learning process, our learning skills, our knowledge attainment, all of those is almost consistently equal to everybody.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is not about me being a CEO or any of that stuff. This is about operators. All of us are being operators, doing what we know how to do exactly the same all the time.
Yeah. Would you, I know one of the themes that certainly the producer was keen that I asked was this idea. Would you rather appoint a disruptor or an innovator to Resecurity?
I think disruptor,
Hmm.
not disruptor internally, externally.
Right.
Meaning somebody who has the, you know, somebody who has the bravery to do the right thing all the time.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you think that's hard to do that?
Absolutely. I think we see that across any organization. The courage and the bravery to do the right thing and, being honest about it doesn't get you, glory all the time. We're, as a small company, we've, in the beginning, we struggle with that because people, A, didn't know who we were, even though people that knew us knew who we were. But small company, coming out and saying that, somebody breached, parliament or government agencies or major Fortune 500 companies, they thought we were a joke. But, you know, but it was but I think part of it is, we decided, we knew the kind of the blowback. But I think throughout the times, people understood that, these aren't just some kids that's hand typing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. No, it's a fascinating world, and I guess one of the challenges for people like me that read a bunch of stuff is it's hard to know what goes on in your world, right? It feels like one of those, Hollywood type enterprises rather than a kind of, business as usual enterprise. So it's, but I guess people find cultures that they embrace.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Gene, I've realized I'm going to be able to ask you questions all night, but I do need to wrap up. So, how do people find out more about you or about about the company? If you could wave a magic wand, what do you hope the next 5 years looks like for the organization?
I think I want to continue to grow, expand businesses, our operations into different parts, learn more about our potential customers. We have more excitement learning about our customers, like in the military, government, enterprises in different region, different need. It's interesting for us because it also keeps us human. Perfect example is in the Africa region. Their need for a threat is not like, oh, there's a hacker that's stealing my money. It's like real threat. They have real, terrorists. Um, so it keeps us grounded. But as a company, I think we want to continually grow what we planned. All this organic nonsense doesn't mean anything to me. But we had a plan 2 years ago, and we continue to follow it. We've grown over 1,400% since 2019, and we are continuing to grow in the path, in the pace that we want, in the things that we want to do. So, 5 years, hopefully we'll be talking again. Maybe this time we'll have a pint of beer and talk about it in person.
Absolutely. I feel like there's a whole world that you'd open our eyes to that would surprise all of us. So, and if someone wants to find more about you, Gene, what's the best way that they can do that? Are you easy to find on Instagram and with the Rolexes or yeah?
Yeah, just we're LinkedIn. Go to www.resecurity.com. Contact us anytime, and of course, for you, if you ever want to just have a conversation or need any insight into things, feel free to reach out anytime.
Nice, I really appreciate it. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and being such an illuminating interview.
Thank you, sir.
That was great. Thank you so much, Gene.
Bye.
That's it for this week's episode of IDEA Collider. To continue the conversation, visit our website at ideapharma.com. Follow us in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcast. Until next time, I'm Mike Rea, wishing you great success.